out of my body experience because it wasn't like a unfamiliar thing. It was familiar because I'd already been meditating for 2 years, and I didn't have that every time I meditated, but I was familiar with the experience of separation of mind and body. That's the point. So when I started going down in the ocean, I see this like classic in the movies, you see the surface of the water going like this, getting farther away from you. And I'm freaking out. I'm holding my breath. And I popped out of my body is the only way I can describe it.
Today, I'd like to welcome Kelvin Chin to the show. Kelvin, welcome. It's such an honor to have you here. I'm glad we finally made it. How is
Yeah.
how's 2024 treating you so far?
Oh, so far so good. Yeah. Just had a birthday. So another click of the calendar, as they say.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I'm really excited. There's so much for us to talk about today, including your near-death experience. And I know you've written a couple books. I have a couple of copies myself, and lots of territory we can go with past lives and the afterlife and World War II memories. So why don't we get started with the near-death experience? Because I'm super excited to hear you share about that.
Sure. Sure. So the near-death experience I had was in 1972, the summer of 72. And I know exactly when it was because I was doing a summer program at UCSD in San Diego, California. And I went to school in New Hampshire, but I went to do an intensive language program in the summer. So I flew out to California, never been to California before in my life, and therefore had never been in the Pacific Ocean before. And so on registration day, walked down, met a girl who was in my class, happened to be literally in my intensive Mandarin Chinese summer class at registration, and said, "Hey, let's go to the beach. The class doesn't start till tomorrow, whatever." And so we went down to the beach. There was nobody at the beach, and so people who know San Diego, the beach is the Pacific Ocean it's on the Pacific Ocean. Basically, you got to walk down a driveway. So we walked down this kind of emergency driveway that goes down to the beach, and there's nobody there. It was a beautiful summer June day. No lifeguards are ever there, but there was nobody else on the beach but the two of us. So neither of us had been in the Pacific before. We're both from Massachusetts. And so we go in, I pick my feet up to dunk, it's hot, dunk underwater. And I see her starting getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, like really fast. And so I'm getting pulled out in what's called a rip current. I didn't know what that was. I know what it is now. And it's like a river in the ocean, and it was pulling me out really fast. I could see there's 300-foot high cliffs at Torrey Pines. It's called Torrey Pines State Park right there. And 300-foot high cliffs are going like this, and they're getting small really fast. And so I'm freaking out. I'm trying to swim back in. I'm doing the exact wrong thing. You're not supposed to swim straight. You're supposed to go at an angle to the beach, try to get out of the current. But I forgot all my Boy Scout training, and I panicked. And I'm exhausted. And a friend of mine told me he told me if the cliffs were 3 to 4 inches high, from my vision, he's the 300-foot high cliffs. He said I was 1.7 miles out. So within a matter of seconds, I'm 1.7 miles out. I'm exhausted because I'm swimming into the current, and I start going down. Now, the important part of the story is that I'd already been meditating for 2 years. Before that, I was 19 years old when I learned to meditate. And I had been familiar with the mind and the body being distinct from each other. So it wasn't I have a friend, we met at some of these NDE conferences, and he calls it the "oh wow gee whiz" experience. He said, I did not have an "oh wow gee whiz, oh my God, I'm out of my body" experience because it wasn't like a unfamiliar thing. It was familiar because I'd already been meditating for 2 years, and I didn't have that every time I meditated, but I was familiar with the experience of separation of mind and body. That's the point. So when I started going down in the ocean, I see this like classic in the movies, you see the surface of the water going like this, getting farther away from you. And I'm freaking out. I'm holding my breath. And I popped out of my body is the only way I can describe it. But I willed myself right back in because I knew what it was. If I had had what my friend my friend Jeff calls the oh wow gee whiz experience, I probably would have been 20, 30 feet, 40 feet down by the time I kind of came to and realized, oh, I'm out of the but I knew what it was. So I put myself right back in, struggled the 4 or 5 feet to the surface of the ocean again. And just the only thought that I remember having was something like, take it easy or take your time or something like that. It wasn't even a thought. It was a feeling of not panicking because I was panicking. And then and my friend who was standing on the beach, she was not obviously pulled out in the rip current. She said she estimates it took me about an hour to swim back in. She just stood there and watched me to make sure that she had eyes on me.
Yeah. So you popped out, popped back in, and then swam 1.7 miles back to shore.
Yeah, it took me about an hour because I still didn't remember to go like this. I was still going into the current, but when I went down and I was not swimming, obviously going down in the ocean, my guess is that I probably got pushed out of the current or something.
Right.
I got out of the current somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily.
Yeah. I was curious, like, how did you get out of the current? Because I grew up in California. I'm very familiar with the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
So that's why I was kind of giggling when you were talking about the currents. But
yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea how I got out of the current, but I obviously must have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. And then when you got back to the shore,
I passed out. I crawled up on the beach like you see in the movies with the shipwreck.
Yeah.
The shipwreck people, and they crawl up on the beach and your feet are still in the water and she said I slept for about half an hour.
Yeah.
20, 30 minutes or something. I passed out. Yeah.
Wow. Did she call like any emergency?
No, because it's too far away to get to the road or anything. She literally did not want to leave me.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's so fascinating. I have heard you speak about your story, and every time I hear it, I'm just like, wow, that's so amazing that your intuition led you to meditation.
Yeah.
So in that moment, instead of being out of your body and having this like, whoa, what's going on? Your body would have probably not been resuscitated, right?
Oh, I would have been 100 feet down because
Right.
it was those people who don't know, the Pacific Ocean is very deep, very fast compared to the Atlantic Ocean, for example.
Yes.
It's
yeah. Lots of cliffs. Yeah. And the currents are strong. Very, very.
Very strong.
Yeah. Well, now I'm curious. So when you got back, a lot of people who have had near-death experiences, once they're back in their body, they have different gifts, or they're more sensitive. I'm curious if there was anything along those lines for you.
Yeah, people have asked me that before, and there's nothing that I can point to. I've heard I have many clients who've had NDEs, and I've heard their stories and so forth and so on. And I've written about some of them in my books. But though they're genuine experiences that they've had, I didn't have that. When I came back, I wasn't like, oh wow, I'm going to change my life path and this and that and whatever. And it does do that for some people because they go, whoa. I did not have that experience, that resultant effect. I came back, and to be honest, I was afraid to go in the ocean. That was the experience I had. It was like, it's like after seeing the movie Jaws, you don't want to go in the ocean anymore. It was like that. It was like, I'm not going to go in and I'm not going too deep. I'll go wading, but I want to make sure people are real close to me. That's how I was. I was a little freaked out.
Reasonably so.
What's that?
I said reasonably so.
Yes, reasonably so. I almost drowned, you know?
Mm,
So, and that had never happened to me before, you know, and I'm a decent swimmer and everything, but when you get pulled out like that, plus when you're freaking out, I panicked. I was 20 years old. I panicked, and all that cortisol and everything goes through you. And it doesn't matter how strong you are and everything, but when your mental fight or flight causes all that cortisol, it makes you even more tired.
right.
And so when you're out there 2 miles out and you're tired because you're trying to swim in, plus you're tired because you're freaking out because of the cortisol and lactic acid flooding your system, you know, throughout your muscles, that makes it even worse. So that is what, no, but my past life memories opened up later. I don't know, but I don't think so much from the NDE's experience because it was 5 years later when my past life memories opened up. But I do think that the meditation accelerated my opening.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I did grow up in California. Without having better judgment, a friend and I were letting the rip current one time just do somersaults with us.
Wow,
And
really? Wow.
yeah, it was not one that was that strong, but I've actually always been afraid of the ocean. I love the beach. I love the ocean. But as far as going in, I've always been afraid. And I always thought that it was because I grew up on the Pacific Ocean, because I saw the crazy intense water and the currents and the cliffs and the rocks and everything. I thought I was afraid because of that. But what I've actually learned in the past year or so is that I'm afraid of the ocean because in a past life, I did drown.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that your past life experiences came a few years after you almost drowned.
Yeah. Yeah. Came about
Yeah.
5 years later. Yeah.
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 So I'm curious, how were your past lives revealed to you?
So what happened was, first of all, you got to understand, I did not believe in reincarnation. I didn't believe in past lives. I didn't even believe in an afterlife. I didn't believe in heaven or anything. When I first learned to meditate when I was 19 years old, I was not doing it for spiritual reasons. I was doing it for anxiety reasons. I was really stressed out in college, and that's why I learned. But as I said, naturally, I just started, you know, my mind started, you know, going like expanding its conscious capacity. That's what my hands are doing. Expanding my conscious capacity
It's
of my mind naturally started happening. Like, and so even though I intended to, you know, get rid of my anxiety, which it did, all of this opening started happening gradually. And when my past life memories opened up, I didn't even know that it had anything to do with past lives because the first experience I had in 1977, and I recommend that people write stuff down, like, because I didn't write anything down, but I know it was sometime in early-ish 1977, um, when I had this really upsetting dream. That was the thing, but I can point to that was the beginning of the past life memories resurfacing. But at the time, I just thought it was a bad dream. I just thought, oh, I'm having a nightmare, right? A really, really bad nightmare,
Yeah.
and very upset emotionally nightmare. And because then, about, let's say, 6 months later, I know the dates of when I was on this meditation retreat was November to December 1977, because I have that written down, not because of any past life stuff, but I have it written down because I wrote down when I went to meditation retreats.
Yeah.
And so when I was there, I started telling a friend of mine who was also on the retreat with me, my friend George. He finished my dream. I didn't even tell him. I told him the beginning. I said I was really upset. I had this dream about 6, 8 months ago. All I said was something like, I was really upset. And he goes, yeah, and you were lying on the side of a road in a ditch, and this is what you were wearing, this kind of, you know, toga thing or whatever. This outfit he described to me, and your sandals were really worn out, and this and that, and you were crying all night. And that's what started making me go, huh?
How did he know that?
And then he said, That's what I said to him. I said, that's what I said to him, what you just said to me. I said, how do you know that? How did you know my dream, what I look like and what I was wearing and where I was and how I was feeling? And how do you know that? And he goes, because I found you 2,000 years ago. I found you that morning lying in the ditch. And so even then I doubted it because I used to make fun of people. I used to make fun of people who were like in the past lives and stuff like, oh, yeah, okay, right, yeah, imagination, fantasy. But so even then when he said that, I thought, oh, maybe he's just reading my mind. I've never thought of him as a psychic, we've been friends since college, 8 years before or 9 years before we met, so we've been friends for a long time. Well, it's not to say he's never been like psychic before, but maybe he's just picking up on something. I don't know. So I was really kind of like, for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, he's telling you about your own dream, and he says he found you
Well,
2,000
also,
years ago.
yeah, also, he said to me, we're in this meditation retreat in the hotel right here. We were out for a walk after lunch or something. And he said, and every time we do a group meditation and we start moving, we were doing these energy movement kind of exercises. In addition, separate from the meditation, we were doing, after you meditate, we were starting doing this movement of energy stuff, we just call it exercises mentally,
Mhm.
He said, for the last 2 weeks, you say you've been flipping over in your back, feeling like you're being crucified upside down. I said, yeah, so? And he goes, well, what do you think that's from? He's like, what do you think that's from? He's like, and you don't, and he made the connection for me, which I had not made the connection between the dream and the being crucified upside down experience.
Yeah. So were you open to what he was saying, or did you think he was crazy at that point?
I think I was both. I can you be both? I was both, I was like,
Yeah.
really? Okay, wow, that's crazy. Okay, whatever. And then I'd go back in and meditate and do the group meditation thing, and then I'd flip over my back. It was involuntary. I
Mhm.
wasn't, it just my feet literally, the energy would just go through my body and my feet flipped over. And then mentally and emotionally, I'm experiencing being crucified. And I knew it, but I didn't know why I knew it at the time, because I didn't believe in reincarnation. So I was like, why am I having these experiences? And why is my feet just automatically going over like that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened next?
So then I relaxed, that I stopped resisting. And then the floodgates opened and I started having all these memories and so forth from 2,000 years ago. And then I started having memories. I have it more chronologically in my book. This is the book about my past lives, right? My third book, After the Afterlife, it's called. Anyway, I'm saying this because I may mess up the order, but I I think after that I started having memories of being in the Crusades about 6 months later that happened. And then somewhere in there, I started having a memory of being a slave on a car on the ocean, floating on a piece of wreckage, like saving my life by holding on to a piece of big, huge hunk of wood, which was a ship, piece of the ship. It was like the size of a door or something,
Yeah.
you know. So I had those two memories. I can't remember which one came first, but around the same time, within 6 months, and I started, but it was piecemeal, little things, like seeing myself on the wreckage first, knowing that I was a slave because I had manacles, I had stuff around my wrist and my ankles and stuff. And so I knew I'd been a slave, but on what? And then I realized it was a ship. So little pieces. Then I started seeing the ships. So I knew that they were ancient ships with rowing. So then I saw myself being chained down to a seat, rowing, on one of these big, huge ships. And then I figured out, so I knew it was, thousands of years ago, right? It wasn't even in the 1800s. This was thousands of years ago. And so rowing, like a lot of us sitting next to each other rowing these big, huge oars, and saw my skin. I was very, very dark black skin, very, very, very dark African black skin. And then I saw, and then later, these are all little pieces. I call them breadcrumbs. I saw a hook come down. I saw a thing come down, like a ramp come down from one ship onto our ship, and I looked it up on the internet. Well, the internet didn't exist, so I looked it up in Encyclopedia Britannica, something, whatever,
Right.
whenever this happened, because that was 1978. And so I started having piecemeal. So maybe I did look it up in the internet in the 1990s or something, the late 90s, when the internet came around, because I got piecemeal. So maybe the ramp part came much later, I remember. So that one told me that it was the Romans had these ramps that would come down on these these warships from 2,400 years ago, would come down onto a ship, and they had these metal hook on the end that looked like a claw or a beak or something or whatever, and they called them, in Latin, they were called ravens. So it was like a raven's claw or a raven beak or something on the end of these wooden ramp. And then the sailors would run across the ramp to the other ship and then, fight and so forth. And I didn't know this as Kelvin Chin, but I learned this when I looked it up, because I saw this in my visions.
Were your visions, like, were they all like dreams, like in the sleep state, or
That's a good
did they
question.
occur a different way?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, these visions were happening in my rest period after my meditation. So I always tell my meditation students, because I've been teaching meditation for 50 years now, right? I tell them, rest afterwards. Don't just get up right after you meditate. Rest for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes or whatever afterwards. Just lie there or sit there. And because it's a time of integration, and stuff like this can happen. Who knows? It won't always happen, but it can, because you're in this more open state. You're not focusing your mind on anything yet when you open your eyes up, and you're not in a meditative mode either. So that's when most of these things happened. Not always. Sometimes it would happen later, once I really started getting used to this, just relax and letting this stuff flow. It would happen to me when I'm in the shower or when I'm driving the car, if the radio's not on. It just happened all the time. But at first it was in the rest period. And so I figured out, it was really interesting, because I figured out that I was not on the Roman ship, because I would see these things coming down onto our ship. So who are the Romans fighting? They were fighting the Carthaginians. They fought the Carthaginians for hundreds of years on the Mediterranean. The Carthage Empire ruled the Mediterranean Sea long before the Romans did. So, and they only used this ramp with the claw and a beak or whatever it was on the end, during one of the Punic Wars. There were, I think, 3 Punic Wars. And so I was in the first Punic War, I guess, and it was when they used them. And because after that, it equaled the playing field so much by giving the Romans an advantage to just board the other ship very easily, instead of just ramming them from a distance, ramming them and then backing up and whatever. They could board them very easily, take over the ship, and then it allowed the Romans naval technology to catch up, so that their technology of their ships were more maneuverable, and they got rid of the ramps. They didn't use them anymore.
Wow. So I'm curious, because 1978, we didn't have podcasts, or like information wasn't as easy to come by. And also a lot of this stuff, past lives, meditation, wasn't even really mainstream. Or if it was actually kind of a little bit taboo.
Yeah.
So as you were having these visions, did you automatically put it together as your past life, or did you go find someone or some form to help you understand that. I'm curious about that part of your journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I did not go anywhere. I didn't read books. I didn't go to workshops. I didn't. The only person I talked to was my friend George, because it turned out that he started having, because when he first told me, finished my dream and said, you know who you are? You're flipping over in your back upside down, getting crucified, all that. And I said, no. And he told me, he told me that he had already been having his past life memories opening up for a couple of years before then. So his started opening up in 1975. Mine started opening up in 77, and he knew who I was in some of my past lives. He recognized me from us having been together as friends in other lifetimes, including one 4,000 years ago. So, but he didn't want to tell me until I started having my own experiences. Then, so to answer your question, he's the only person I really talked to back then about it. Maybe I told my girlfriend every once in a while so she didn't think I was totally crazy if she overheard me saying something. I told my wives, my first wives, my first and second wife, I told them, my kids know. But no, I pretty much kept it under wraps until about whenever, this book came out a couple of years ago. Book came out this year,
Mm-hmm.
but I started talking about it just, I don't know when it was, 2017, 2018, recently.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I have actually interviewed a handful of past life regressionists, and one of the common themes or reasons that they found that as a path for them and continue to help people with remembering past lives is to heal ailments or complete something. And I'm curious if it's been revealed to you, or if there's been any kind of purpose or reason for all this remembrance.
Yeah, the way I look at it is to um, learn more about myself, the good, bad, and the ugly, everything. Not just the good stuff, but everything. And my strengths, my weaknesses, things that I've done that maybe were not so great, and what have I learned from them? And what have they taught me over the millennia? Because my memories go back 6,000 years now, a couple of dozen lifetimes. So, what has that taught me that I can use in today's Kelvin Chin continual present, 21st century, now 2024. The 2023 is now a past life in a
Right.
sense, right? Right? So we're always in the continual present. I use everything in my past, whether it's from this lifetime or another lifetime, doesn't matter, to inform me more about who I am. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because with the one past life that I know of now that has been revealed to me, I keep asking, why should I know about this? What do I need to know? And I really don't have an answer other than the person I was in that past life died on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. And in this life, I got sober on December 7th, 2013. And so I'm still in the discovery process, because this was just revealed in the past 6 months. But I just find it fascinating how so many of us are having these memories. And I always, my brain can't just be like, oh, we're having memories, and stop there. My brain has to say, why? What is
Yeah.
the point? Why do we remember when we come here and we forget?
Yeah, and I don't think you got to dig too deep, because sometimes it may seem like there's some bigger meaning for why you're remembering stuff. But that's your interpretation. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no one reason, I don't think. I think there's many reasons. There's many. I don't even think of it as reasons. Why did I remember this memory as a Carthaginian slave, or remember being crucified, or remember being a crusader in the Third Crusades, or whatever? It's just, I look at it as, what can I take these experiences as, look at them as opportunities, and what can I take from them as opportunities to learn more about myself? And what can they inform me about myself? And if nothing pops into your consciousness, Christina, that's apparent, just leave it. You don't have to be like digging for it. It may simply, at this point, for you, because it just opening up, you said in March, I think you said, this past year, right? March 2023. It just, if for you at this point anyway, it just could be the breadcrumb of, hey, there's something about this past life stuff thing, the theories. And by the way, you have some memories that confirm that there's something to be said about these past life theories, that maybe it's actually a reality. So that you could at least start there and then see where it goes. Because like I said, I've had these breadcrumbs falling, in front of me, and then I pick them up and I look at it and go, oh, that's interesting. It's kind of like that for me since 1977. And I'm talking about one lifetime, not just the 24, 25 lifetimes that I remember, but just one of those. I have like hundreds of breadcrumbs like that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. It is really fascinating. I haven't pushed too hard on it. I just ask what, why, when, where, who. And as you were talking about that, you had mentioned too, just a few minutes earlier, that everything is always happening in the now. And so I'm really curious your perspective on this. So from my interviews, from my experience, time is linear in this reality, but really everything is happening all right now. And some past life regressionists can even say that our past lives are happening right now. So I'm curious, do you think that in our remembering or becoming aware of our past lives, do you think we're just tapping into like a bigger timeline possibly? I'm curious your thoughts about that.
So no, short answer is no. The longer answer is, my experience and my logic tells me that, so they match. In other words, experience and logic match on this question, which is time is linear. And when we say we're in the continual present, it's a continual present because it's always changing. That's why I use the phrase continual. So when people say we're always in the now, that doesn't mean that everything that's always existed is now. That's a conflation. That's a confusion of two different concepts. So you don't want to mix two different concepts together that don't go together. So yes, it's true that we're always in the continual present, and like what I said a split second ago is now the past, right? Do you know the guy? He's
Right.
you ever heard of Swami Brahmananda? Swami Beyondananda. He's a comedian. He's like my age, so he's been around for decades, but he still does act sometimes. If you look him up, you Google him, you can find YouTubes of him. Swami Beyond Ananda. It's a joke, right? Beyond Ananda. Anyway, so he did this thing like a couple of years ago around New Year's, right? He goes, yeah, people talk about being in the present. Oh, you just missed it. You just missed it again, because the present is always changing. So I call it the continual present, right?
Right.
But that's not the same thing as saying we're always in the now, meaning everything is happening at the same time. No, it's just that we're always in the present and it's changing. That's true.
Right.
But things that are in the past have happened and they're not happening in the now. The now then is now the past.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So don't confuse the statement that the now and the past is the past was the now then to be the now, if that makes sense. So my experience is that no, you can tap into your own memories, right? And you can tap into other people's memories too. So there's no guarantees and I say this in my book, that my memories are absolutely my memories, but what we can look at is what I call reliable evidence. Okay, it's chapter 17 in my new book. I talk about how can we tell what's accurate and what's not accurate, what's imagination, fantasy. And so I say, you look at things like, do you have multiple sensory experiences that go along with the memory, like taste, touch, smell, whatever? What's the emotional charge? In other words, to what degree is it emotionally invested in, intense in the experience? Okay, like some of my battlefield memories are really, really intense, and some of my memories of being in the zone in a battle, meaning everything slows down, and I can see things that people are going to do before they do it, and I was up until my World War II memory, I was never killed in battle, which is highly unusual when you're the first person into battle. I'm known to be at the phalanx, at the spearhead, at the first one of 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 troops. I'm the first one into the battle, and I was never killed. That's unusual. But I remember things slowing down and how easy it was to succeed. We'll just use that nice euphemistic word, in battle, right? But so those are things to look at. And the other is outside corroborative evidence, like somebody you don't know says something about some memory about you. That's the story. I don't know if you remember that, the letter in the book about this guy, a guy, his name's William Baldridge, who I met in 2020, telling me about experiences that he and other people witnessed. A guy in regular weekly lectures talking in 1973 about somebody who was a meditation teacher in 1973, who had also been this person and this person. And he was talking about this person who I never met in 1973 was talking about my past lives. And I was a meditation teacher in 1973, but I didn't know the guy. And that was 4 years before I had any memories. I just heard about that in 2020.
Wow. Okay, I love where we're going with this because, like we had talked about before we pressed record, and I told you that I was super skeptic. I'm so skeptical. Even though I see and I feel and I, know things, I'm still like crazy skeptical. So there's always like, I know what I felt when I was at Pearl Harbor. I got on the boat. Well, first I walked up and I saw images that I had dreamed of my whole life. And I was like, I've dreamed of this. And then we got on the boat to go to the USS Arizona, and I just started crying. Like it wasn't, I'm so sad for all these people, right? It wasn't like that. It was just tears. Like they were just coming out. And I looked at my sister and I said, I have a past life connection here. That's just what came out of my mouth. And when I got home from Hawaii, from that trip to Oahu, I started just watching things about Pearl Harbor. So I watched a couple documentaries. I watched the movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And when it got to the part where the harbor was being bombed, I couldn't swallow. I couldn't breathe. Like I was like you're not underwater. Like just swallow and breathe. And I was crying, sobbing. Okay, not just crying, sobbing. And so what you just said about how you outline that in, I think you said chapter 17 of your book, it's like, that makes a lot of sense to me because that is a very intense, it was very intense, both experiences. They were very intense. They were very visceral. Like I really could not swallow. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swallow. My chest hurt.
You just checked all the boxes on the list. Yeah.
Right. And then when I was there in December, we talked about this too before we pressed record. I went to the 82nd commencement ceremony. And as we were sitting there, as the speakers were explaining what happened that day and remembering the day, I had visions and I could see things happening over the harbor. And probably about the entire time I was sobbing as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that, I say I had a past life, and then in the back of my mind, I think, did you really?
Yeah. I think you got to accept that, Christine. I think you got to start
I know,
accept.
I am right now. It's happening.
Yeah, I think you really do. Because those are there are recognition memories, I call them, where that and there's degrees of recognition memories. And recognition memories are like, for those people who don't know the term, I came up with this term years ago when I started talking about this stuff. It's like deja vu on steroids. That's kind of what you're describing. It's like deja vu, except times 100, you know? And so, and then you're talking about, and there are degrees of recognition memory also. And you're talking about a degree of recognition memory that you just described to us, which is also extreme
Yeah,
and intense. So yeah, I think you just got to relax. You got to accept that this is highly probable,
yeah,
highly probable. Because, like I said, there's no absolute proofs to anything except in mathematics, in theorems. It's like there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. Okay, fine. These are interpretations of our experiences. And that's why I list those that checklist of stuff to look at. Okay, look at this and look at this. How does it meet this one? How does it meet this one? And to what degree? And so forth and so on. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm curious, this book just came out,
Yep.
and this started happening for you in the 70s.
Yeah.
What was it that inspired you to write the book now?
Yeah. What inspired me, a couple things. So, something that happened in 1982, my mom died tragically, really fast illness, very advanced cancer. I was very close to my mom. She was young, very young, and she died suddenly. And so that kind of propelled me into death and dying stuff, but not past life stuff so much, but helping people with grieving and so forth, because I was grieving, you know. And so that's one piece of it. And then I started a nonprofit helping people with overcoming the fear of death and dying in 2014-ish or something like that. I started about 10 years ago. I started a nonprofit. Once I left the corporate and legal world, had to make money to raise a family and so forth, put food on the table for my two kids. But I kind of semi-retired about 10 years ago, and started a nonprofit. And so that was starting to help people with death and dying issues. And then, like I said, I don't know if it was 2017 or 2018 or something like that, I started publicly opening up about my past lives. So it was just to help people with death and dying fears, really, initially. And now I teach classes about the afterlife and so forth for educational reasons. And it may help people reduce their fears, but some people are just curious about what it's like, too.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly why I wanted to interview you, and why I've been interviewing people about their near-death experiences and past life regressionists, because I mean, I learned a while ago in the beginning of like my recovery journey and my spiritual journey that we're afraid of two things. We're afraid of either, like, all fears can be drilled down to either the fear of not being loved or the fear of dying. And I know when I listen to others share their experiences about their near-death experience or about their past lives, and in my own experience of remembering my past life, it was like, we are eternal. Like, and that became so real for me once I really realized that, oh yeah, I've been here more than once. This isn't my first time, and I'm not gonna be done when this body is done. And so thank you for being that for people. I've also heard someone else say that after her near-death experience, she wasn't afraid to die, and that changed her whole life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it can change people's lives positively in that way. A lot of times that happens with NDEs. And
Mhm.
it's really important because fear restricts us. It restricts it sucks our energy. It restricts us. And people sometimes, every once in a while, you have a lecture and somebody says, well, fear is really good thing because it prevents you from going too close to the Grand Canyon and going over the cliff for 2 miles down. It's like, no, that's not fear that's preventing you from doing that. That's just using your smarts and not being stupid to go too close to the edge. It's
Right.
that's because you know that intellectually you're gonna fall and hurt yourself. No, that fear is the emotion caused by the anticipation of unhappiness. And so in that case, sometimes people say, well, you don't want to be unhappy if you're dead, if you fall over and you're dead. Okay, fine. But no, fear restricts us, it constricts us, and it actually makes you make poor decisions, not better decisions. Yeah. So fear is really the happiness damper, and what are we here for other than to pursue happiness? And we use that phrase pursuit of happiness. I've recently kind of reframed it and call it the pursuit of contentment and inner peace, because that's really what it's all about. Because I've been sad at my uncle's funeral a couple of years ago. I went, but I was inwardly content and at peace still, regardless, and even though I was sad. So it's not always about being happy all the time, in some state of blissful happiness all the time. No, if you're going to go to a funeral, you're not going to be happy,
Right.
but you can be at peace inside. And to me, that may be even more accurate way of describing what at least my objective is in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for outlining that, because it is constricting. Fear is constricting. And my whole journey, everything started when I went to treatment for an eating disorder. And I went to a holistic center. It was there that I was introduced to meditation, acupuncture. I had a spiritual therapist, and it took me a long time to recover. That is the truth. And 5 years after I left there is when I got sober. So this has been a 15-year journey so far. And I was always trying to be happy, always. And I couldn't be happy. It was just like unattainable or something. But when I shifted my focus to just be in the experience, that's where that piece, came from, because no one's going to be happy all the time. We're just not. And as I've done this, podcast, and I've researched other podcasts and listened to so many interviews, what has always felt true to me is now being spoken by so many people. And that is, what I think the gift is in sharing our stories and writing our books and in speaking our truths, because we really don't need to be afraid. And it really isn't about being happy all the time, right? It's about stringing together all the little moments to have like a whole fulfilled life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I call it inner contentment, contentment and inner peace. Contentment and inner peace. Am I content? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know we've been chatting for a while, and I do have a couple of questions that I ask
Sure.
all of my guests. But before that, I just want to know if there's anything else that you want to share about what we've said or what we haven't said.
I'll segue something from what you said in your story about your World War II memory,
Okay.
which is I teach meditation. I've been teaching for 50 years. I've taught thousands of people. I taught the first meditation courses in the history of West Point Military Academy, and also in the U.S. Army in Korea, and all the U.S. Army bases in South Korea, and including on the demilitarized zone. One of my meditation students was in the movie that you starred in the movie that you talked about watching, Pearl Harbor.
However,
Yeah, I think it might have been her breakthrough I don't know if it was her breakout movie or not, in the because that was from the 1990s, wasn't it? I think
I
something
think
like
so. I think it
that.
was the late 90s, like 98 or 99.
Yeah. So Kate Beckinsale was in that movie.
Wow.
She was in that movie with Ben Affleck and those guys and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, she's one of my students, but very easy. The meditation's very easy. Only have to do it 10 to 15 minutes each time, twice a day. No concentration, no controlling the mind, no clearing the mind of thoughts. So it's very, very different from most other meditation techniques out there. The other thing I just mentioned generally, not just with regards to meditation, but anything that I do, whether it's afterlife, past life stuff, fears about death and dying, I do a free uh, consultation with anybody in the world. I'm in 67 countries so far. I do a free consultation with people. They just find my website, Google my name, find my website, and one of my websites, send me an email and a contact page, and I do a free consultation with people. It's part of my nonprofit.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include that in the description of this show. The first question is, how would you define or describe God or source, whatever you refer to creator as?
So, couple of things on that. First of all of my work is non-religious. I help people with all kinds of beliefs. They believe in God. Some people don't believe in God. Some people believe in God in this way. Other people believe in God in that way. It's like some people are atheists and agnostics. Some people aren't sure. I help everybody across cultures and across religions. So that's the kind of a blanket statement of where I come from a professional standpoint. If you're asking me personally what my belief is, um, my my belief is that first of all we're eternal. So you used that phrase earlier, and eternity means without beginning and without end. No need for a creator of the universe. Now, could we have been created as humans? Yes. Could we have been a different life form before we took on a human life form? Yeah, I talk about in this book, I talk about being an animal. One of my memories of being an animal. So, but could we have even been other life forms not on Earth? That's possible. Yeah, I actually have a memory being on another planet as well. But so could there have been a creator of some segment of that? Yes, that's possible. But if eternity means no beginning, no end, then the soul, what I call the soul, which I draw a distinction between the soul and our personality. Our personality can change over time. Obviously, it changes. I'm Kelvin Chin now. I was a crusader another time, et cetera, et cetera. But my personality even can be the same or similar from when I was a crusader, and that's what I talk about in the last half of my book. The similarities of and the carrying forth throughout time or long periods of time of one's personality pretty much being the same personality traits. But the soul, I draw a distinction, and the soul is not it's uninfluenced. It's not influenced by the continuum of change. That's what eternity means. And so I think our soul is eternal. So back to your question about God, I don't think there's a need for God to have created my soul. If my soul is eternal, it exists. It exists, always existed, and always will exist. Is this provable? No, but it's my if that's my that's what my logic tells me. If energy cannot be created nor destroyed, so I don't know if that answers your question. So, but are there beings on the other side who I have communicated with many hundreds, arguably thousands of times since I opened up to the other side in 1986? So that started happening in the mid 80s. Yeah, there are lots of beings on the other side. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the
Thank
question.
you. Yeah, it does. Actually, it's a different answer that I've heard from what I've heard, and that's why I asked the question, because nothing's provable, and we've all had our own experiences that make up our answer now, and it could be different a year from now or tomorrow.
And here's the key thing in the way I think of this. and the way I've perceived myself and other people and experience in the universe is that we each have free will. So even if one believes in God in the way that a lot of people believe in God, capital G, my experience is that notwithstanding that entity's existence or non-existence, each individual mind is sovereign. It's unique, it's sovereign unto itself, and can make its own decisions. So I talk about free will in a decision-making way, not in a moral way that a lot of times you'll hear philosophers and religious theologians talk about free will in a moral authority kind of way. I'm not using free will that way. I'm using free will as, do you make a decision? Can you decide to believe in God or not believe in God? Obviously you can. Therefore, you have free will.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, what would you say is the purpose of life?
Purpose of life, I say, is individual for each individual. I don't think there's one purpose of life that's the purpose of life for everybody. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Again, back to this free will notion. Some people don't believe that anybody has a purpose in life. Some people do believe that they do have a purpose in life, and therefore their purpose in life is X, Y, or Z. Those are all free will choices. There's the decisions that are individual that each person makes. You know, if you're asking me, myself personally, versus, you know, the universe of people out there, my purpose in life is the pursuit of contentment and inner peace. And knowledge of myself is what gives that to me. So if you distilled it down, and I talk about this in all three of my books, you know, it's connecting with myself. For me, it's connecting with myself and knowing more about who I am. Because knowing more about who I am and what makes me tick and what my personality traits are and so forth is going to help me align my desires better with my thoughts, actions, and behavior. And that's what's called fulfillment of one's desires. And what does fulfillment of one's desires lead to? Happiness, contentment, inner peace.
Love it. Thank you so much. And the final question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of yourself, any younger version of yourself, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
That's easy for me. This what may sound simple to some people, but if you're candid with yourself, it's not that easy to emotionally integrate into one's life, is letting people do what they feel they want to do and not trying to make them do what you think they should do. So that's the biggest thing I think that I have learned. That's what free will really means. Again, not in this theological way or philosophical way, but in this very practical way of allowing people to make their own decisions. Now, does that mean that you just let your kid just run amok in their life? No, you can guide them and influence them and educate them. So guiding and influencing and educating is not the same as usurping their free will and kind of forcing them to think the way you think. So it's a fine line there.
It
is. It's a fine line. Those of you who are parents, like I know, Christina, you're a parent like I am, you know, it's a fine line. At some point, after, you know, guiding them and influencing them in their more formative years, you know, at what point do you let them fly? Is it 16, 18, 20, 30, 40 years old before before you let them skin their knees and learn on their own? Yeah. So that's with children. But what about, you know, friends and family and coworkers and so forth? It will vary. The degree of this will vary, and how you apply what I'm talking about will vary. But that's the biggest thing I've learned. Because emotionally, for me, when I was in my 20s, I would get really upset when 100% of the people in my meditation lecture did not learn to meditate. Now I don't worry about that. You know, I back then I had a very high, what they call, you know, close ratio. You know, it was probably 70 or 80%, you know, which was like 30, 40% higher than most of the other meditation teachers in my organization that I was with at the time, which I'm no longer with. But Now I'm like, no, people want my help. I offer them my help. I do not persuade people to work with me. I welcome people. I answer questions. They want to ask me questions. I'll answer them. They'll ask me questions about this class I teach or that class I teach. And whether they sign up for that class or not is up to them. I don't follow up with them and ask them, hey, you're going to send them, hey, you're going to do it. No, it's between them and themselves. So I'm fully available to people, but in this allowing kind of mode.
Kelvin, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, for sharing your mind, for publishing your books. I will include everything in the show notes so that anyone who's interested can take a look and open one of your books. They're fascinating, and I'm so happy that you shared them with me and that you shared yourself with my audience today and the world. It's been such a pleasure and an honor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks. Great to be here. Thank you.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.